Joseph Anthony Barton was born on the 2nd of September 1982 in Huyton, Merseyside. When he was 14 years old, his parents separated, leaving Joey living with his father and grandmother in a rough area. Drugs and crime were commonplace. However, a young Joey Barton avoided slipping into the environment which surrounded him. Later on, Barton would attribute his ability to avoid treading down the wrong path to his grandmother's influence over him. During this time, his father worked as a roofer and made sure to instill a solid work ethic into his oldest son, a work ethic that would prove to be rather useful going forward in life. Before I continue, I would like to quickly remind you I am running a giveaway with OwnASaber.com where at 15,000 subscribers you could be in with a chance at winning the King of London lightsaber, the perfect saber for every Chelsea fan. 3 participants will be chosen and all you have to do to enter is subscribe to the channel and check the pinned comment down below for more information. And with that, on with the video. When he was 14 years old, he joined the Everton Academy, but moved to the Liverpool setup shortly after. Once again, things didn't work out for the young Barton, and following the rejection from the Nottingham Forest Academy, in which he had trials for, he finally settled at Manchester City in 1997. It would take 5 years before Barton made his debut for City in April of 2003. However, if it weren't for Barton losing his shirt on the bench against Middlesbrough, he would have made his official debut in November of the previous year. It wasn't long after making his official debut for the club when things started to turn sour. On the 4th of February 2004, Manchester City played Tottenham Hotspur in the 4th round of the FA Cup. In the 42nd minute, Joey Barton would foul Michael Brown, picking up a yellow card and giving Spurs a free kick in the process. Spurs would go on to score this free kick, ending the half 3-0 to the home team. Joey Barton was enraged and engaged the referee Rob Styles following the half-time whistle. What was said is unknown, however it ended with Barton picking up a second yellow card and a final red to end his game early. Although Manchester City were now down to 10 men, they would go on to make a heroic comeback, scoring 4 goals in the second half, including a 90th minute winner from John Macken. This unnecessary and costly outburst, in hindsight, was only a teaser into the future actions of Joey Barton. On the 25th of July, during a friendly match between City and Doncaster, Joey Barton would go on to incite a 10-man brawl, following his hacking of an opponent. It is not a term nor a practice that is carried out much nowadays, but the term hacking is in reference to deliberately tripping over a player through kicking their shins. Bear in mind, this was only a friendly. Later that year, at a Christmas party, Joey Barton stubbed out his cigar into the eye of a youth player, Jamie Tandy. Allegedly, Tandy was attempting to light Barton's shirt on fire. Barton was fined £60,000 for this incident, which in today's money would be around £103,000. In May of the following year, Joey Barton was driving his car through Liverpool at 2 in the morning when he hit a 35-year-old pedestrian, snapping their leg. A few months later, Barton would again find himself in trouble after assaulting a 15-year-old Everton fan who had provoked the Manchester City player with verbal abuse and by kicking his shin. The child was lucky Barton's teammate Richard Dunn was there to restrain him. It was this incident that led to the Manchester City manager Stuart Pearce demanding Barton undergo anger management therapy whilst fining the player £120,000, or a little over £200,000 in today's economy. For a short while, it appeared the anger management course had helped calm down the on-edge midfielder. However, Barton soon relapsed into his old ways. In September of 2006, Manchester City were away to Everton when Barton decided it was a brilliant idea to moon the Everton fans following a dramatic 90th minute winner at Goodison Park. Although this is rather tame compared to his other misdealings, it still shows his loose cannon nature was far from quelled. 6 months later, Barton was arrested on suspicion of causing criminal damage, along with assault following a disagreement with the taxi driver after a match. Allegedly, whilst on his way home, Barton requested the taxi driver take him through a McDonald's drive-thru. An argument ensued, and the 2 women passengers exited the taxi. It was at this point when Barton and his cousin were locked into the taxi as the driver sent out what is presumed to be a help code over the radio. The driver alleges one of the passengers reached through the cab, ripped the cord from his radio before shattering the safety glass designed to protect the driver, allowing said passenger to strangle the driver. Barton's cousin took responsibility for the incident, and with the lack of fingerprint evidence against Barton, the charges were dropped against him in May of the following year. The tipping point for Joey Barton and Manchester City was finally reached in May of 2007 when Barton viciously assaulted City teammate Ousmane Dabo. During a training session, Barton allegedly invaded the personal space of Dabo, swearing and shouting at him in the process. Dabo shoved the enraged Barton's shoulders to create space before Barton attacked Dabo, striking him in the head multiple times, knocking him unconscious. Dabo was taken to the hospital shortly after with a suspected detached retina, a very serious injury which could have left Ousmane Dabo blind in one eye. As you can imagine, Dabo went on to press charges against Barton, and the controversial player was arrested promptly. He was bailed in August, but was later officially charged with assault. Barton pled not guilty. Joey Barton went on to change his plea to guilty, and in turn received a 4-month suspended prison sentence, 200 hours of community service, and was forced to pay £3,000 to Dabo in order to cover any legal costs. The FA went on to charge Barton with violent conduct and banned him from playing football for 6 games while slapping him with an additional suspended 6-game ban and a £25,000 fine, which is roughly £40,000 today, and thus Joey Barton and Manchester City were done. The next step in Barton's career was Newcastle United. Unfortunately for Barton and the general public, his devious ways continued. Trouble arose during the negotiation process between player and club. Barton was entitled to £300,000 from City, as his contract stipulated that if he were to leave without handing in a transfer request, that was the amount to be paid to him. City refused. Newcastle stepped in and raised their £5.5 million offer to £5.8 million, covering the amount owed to the player. Shortly after making his debut against Hartlepool, Barton broke his foot, ruling him out for a couple of months. Joey Barton made his return to football, and before long he was in the headlines again. During Newcastle's famous derby against Sunderland, Barton endangered a Sunderland player when he raised his studs during a tackle. Players have been injured for far less, and before long Barton was scrutinised by the news of the world, calling for his ban, although Barton escaped any such punishment. Just 2 days after Christmas Day in 2007, Joey Barton was once again arrested on suspicion of assault in Liverpool following a brawl in the early hours of the morning. He was jailed the following day due to the fact Barton was already on bail for 2 other offences, and also it was deemed he was a danger to the public. Following the acquisition of CCTV footage, it was revealed the Newcastle United footballer had punched a man 20 times, knocking him out before attacking a teenager, causing damage to his teeth. For this, Joey Barton was sentenced to 6 months in prison on the 20th of May 2008, but he only served 74 out of his 168 days sentenced. During the proceedings, Joey Barton revealed he was an alcoholic, which in no doubt is a contributing factor to his aggressive outbursts towards his teammates, opponents, and the general public. During his time in prison, Barton was handed another 4 months on a suspended sentence as a result of the Ousmane Dabo assault. He would mark his official return to football on the 30th of August 2008 to a chorus of boos and jeers from the Arsenal fans. His return was, of course, a physical affair, as he put in a rather aggressive challenge against Robbie Lyle's least favourite person, Samir Nasri. Nasri returned the favour later in the match, achieving a yellow card in the process. Following the match, Kevin Keegan, the Newcastle manager at the time, clashed with a number of players and staff within Arsenal due to the incident in question. Barton would then go on to carry out his 6-game ban, leaving Newcastle struggling without his involvement. Shortly after his return, Barton would pick up another injury, sidelining him for months. Tensions continued to rise following his return to football against Liverpool, as Joey Barton once again found himself on the receiving end of a straight red card, this time for a heavy challenge on now Bayer Leverkusen manager Xabi Alonso. 2 days later, on the 5th of May, Joey Barton was suspended from Newcastle indefinitely. Many believe this to be as a result of a red card. However, the true nature of his suspension is far worse. After the players had returned to the dressing room, Alan Shearer, the new Newcastle manager, described Barton's actions as cowardly and that it was a mistake to put him back into the team. Barton fired back towards the manager, claiming to be the best player in the squad. Alan Shearer called him shit. Barton called Shearer a shit manager with shit tactics, whilst calling the assistant manager a prick in the process. Barton was put up for sale shortly afterwards, but no sale came as a result. In fact, it was Shearer who would leave the club heading into the Championship. The following season was quiet for Joey Barton's standards. However, following his return to the Premier League, Barton would strike once again. Literally, he punched a man in the chest, for which the FA found him guilty of violent conduct and suspended him for 3 games. In December of 2010, Joey Barton allegedly made homophobic remarks to Fernando Torres. Barton was involved in a few more scuffles before eventually leaving Newcastle United on the 26th of August 2011 to join QPR. It wasn't long before he was back to his old ways, headbutting Bradley Johnson and receiving a straight red card. Things somehow managed to get even worse, as during QPR's infamous game against Manchester City, yes, that game, Barton would be sent off following an elbow to the face of Carlos Tevez. Barton wasn't done, as he went on to kick Aguero in the back of the knee before attempting to headbutt Vincent Kompany. He was eventually dragged off the pitch by Micah Richards. As a result of this complete meltdown, Barton was fined by the FA £75,000 and received a 12-match ban. QPR stripped the captaincy from him, whilst also fining Barton an amount slightly higher than the FA, £500,000. He was on his final warning. Any further breaches would be met with a swift termination of his contract. Barton left QPR on loan to join Marseille on the 31st of August 2012. The disgraced midfielder went on to claim the move was driven by money, as his partner was expecting a child. Trouble continued to follow Joey Barton, even in France, as he was awarded with a 2-game suspension for calling Thiago Silva an overweight ladyboy on Twitter. Joey Barton in fact escaped a far more serious offence, as his inclusion in the documentary Homophobia in Football was used to disprove Barton's alleged homophobic nature. After returning to QPR, something he claimed he wouldn't do during an ESPN interview, Barton was met with a lot of ferocity from the QPR fans, with many objects being thrown in his direction. Joey Barton continued to lash out at people, one being Tom Huddleston in 2015. After being fouled by another player, Barton attempted to strike Huddleston in the groin area, with the midfielder receiving a prompt red card for his outburst. This was the 9th red card in his career. Barton was subsequently enrolled in more anger management classes before being released from the club. The final 2 years of the player's career were spent between Burnley and Rangers. Barton received another ban, this time being 18 months as a result of a betting violation. This would be the end of his playing career, but not before getting into another argument with a teammate whilst at Rangers, leading to a 3-week ban, followed shortly by the termination of his contract. Although his playing days were over, his days within football were far from that. After completing his ban, Joey Barton officially became the Fleetwood Town manager in April 2018. By the July of the following year, Barton was charged with causing actual bodily harm, this time against another manager, Daniel Stendel. He pled not guilty to pushing over Mr. Stendel, breaking his tooth in the process, and was found so 2 years later. However, by this time, Barton had departed Fleetwood Town and instead was the manager of Bristol Rovers, where he stayed until a few days ago when it was announced Joey Barton had been sacked as the head coach, ending his 3-year spell at the club. I would love to say things are quieting down for Barton, but they haven't. Constant digs towards other managers, comparing his team's poor performance against Newport County to the Holocaust, and finally being charged with assaulting his wife in June of 2021. Allegedly, during a drunken outburst, Barton had kicked his wife in the head after pushing her down before grabbing her by the throat. He was arrested in a very drunken state and replied no comment to each question provided to him by the police. Strangely enough, Joey Barton, after some confusing proceedings, left the courthouse with the charges dropped in the name of an unfair trial. His wife had in fact wrote a letter in support of her husband to the CPS, denying any claim of assault made against him. What really happened that night will remain a mystery, but Stockholm Syndrome is a real thing, and, as you've heard, Joe Barton has a very long history of acting out aggressively towards other people, especially when intoxicated. As I said, we'll never know the full, honest truth, but one thing's for sure, Joe Barton has a dark side. Luke McCormick was a former goalkeeper for the Championship side Plymouth Argyle for many years. On the 6th of June 2008, Luke McCormick was attending a friend and former teammate's wedding in Barton. Like many other weddings, alcohol was served, and like many other wedding goers, alcohol was consumed. The festivities went on into the early hours of the morning, with McCormick reportedly enjoying a number of beers along with the popular drink Sambuca, a liqueur known for its licorice-like flavour. Mixing alcohol is known to have a number of negative and unwanted effects, although not many could have predicted what would happen next. Running on 2 hours of sleep after a long night partying, Luke McCormick made the devastating choice to drive home in his black Range Rover. As you can imagine, he was nowhere near safe enough to go behind the wheel. Still drunk and exhausted, Luke McCormick was in a bad state. At approximately 5:45 in the morning, Luke McCormick collided with the back of a car whilst travelling at around 100 miles an hour. The car in question was a Toyota Previa, driven by Philip Peake, who had woken up early that morning to take his 2 sons, Aaron, aged 10, and Ben, aged 9, to Silverstone. Following the collision, the Toyota drove into a ditch, colliding with a number of trees, killing Aaron and Ben, whilst leaving Philip with injuries that will stay with him for the rest of his life. A number of people witnessed the crash and claimed to hear McCormick say, I'm sorry, I just fell asleep, I'm sorry." The police conducted a breathalyzer test on the footballer and found he was driving whilst over double the legal limit. Luke McCormick was arrested that same day and charged the next with 2 counts of causing death by dangerous driving, driving with no insurance, and driving with excess alcohol in his blood. On the 9th of June, 2 days after the deaths of Aaron and Ben, Luke McCormick appeared at Fenton Magistrates Court, where he would be granted bail until the 16th, where he would appear at the Stoke-on-Trent Crown Court. It would be at this hearing when the charge of driving without insurance would be dropped. On the 2nd of July, Plymouth Argyle suspended the disgraced goalkeeper for obvious reasons, and 20 days later, the contract was terminated entirely. Eventually, on the 6th of October 2008, Luke McCormick was sentenced for the deaths of the 2 brothers after pleading guilty to the charges against him. His sentence was unfortunately incredibly light, 7 years and 4 months for the lives of Aaron and Ben. What's even worse is McCormick would serve only 3 years and 8 months of his already lenient sentence before walking free and walking back into football, signing for Truro City in November 2012 for 11 games before joining League 2 side Oxford United in January. A couple of months later, he would rejoin Plymouth Argyle. Before long, he was made captain and awarded with the Player of the Year honour for his first club. Luke McCormick retired from football on the 3rd of May 2022, aged 39. Aaron and Ben would have been 24 and 22 years old if it weren't for McCormick's recklessness and complete disregard for human life. Unfortunately, the former Plymouth Argyle shotstopper isn't the only footballer who's gotten behind the wheel whilst intoxicated. Jolinton of Newcastle, Wayne Rooney, the former Manchester United star, and Tony Adams, former Arsenal captain and club legend. The prevalence of drink driving in footballers begs the question, why do they do it? I think it's because they think they're invisible. They are idolised and fawned over by thousands, treated like gods in some cases. They have the money to pay for any damages and fines that may occur as a result of their actions. In many cases, they are above the law. For the majority of people, killing 2 children whilst driving drunk would result in an immediate exclusion from welcome society, and not the acceptance provided by football clubs. Even being made captain, a role model, the face of the club. As a fan of Chelsea Football Club, I am more than aware of the actions committed by the former left-back and current Barcelona defender Marcos Alonso. But for those of you who aren't aware, listen closely. Marcos Alonso was born on the 28th of December 1990 in the Spanish capital, Madrid. Much like his father, he began his footballing journey with the Real Madrid Academy, a true honour for any son to follow in his father's footsteps. Alonso would work hard, train hard to show his worth, and hopefully break into the first team, which he eventually accomplished in 2010, making his debut as a substitute in the 90th minute against Racing de Santander. This, unbeknownst to the 19-year-old Spanish defender, would be his only appearance for the club he had worked so hard to play for, and on the 27th of July that same year, it was announced Marcos Alonso would join Bolton Wanderers for £2.1 million, a well-known side in British football who, at the time, was still in the Premier League. During a holiday to Madrid, Marcos Alonso reconnected with his former teammate and good friend Jamie Navarro, in which they enjoyed the nightlife of the city in which the young Spanish defender had grown up in. As you can imagine, alcohol was involved, and at some point in the night, Alonso, Marcos Alonso's brother, Navarro, a female passenger, and an unspecified fifth passenger entered a BMW driven by the Bolton Wanderers defender. By this point, Marcos Alonso was well over the legal drinking limit and was in no state to drive, let alone drive safely. However, much like the previous subject, he was selfish and disregarded the safety and lives of not only his passengers, but the general public of Madrid. It was only a matter of time before tragedy would strike, and strike it did. It was raining and the roads were slick. Alonso was travelling down a road with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit before colliding with a wall at a speed of 70 miles per hour, over double the specified limit. The crash was violent and the car flipped, leaving multiple passengers with serious injuries, one sustaining wounds to their abdomen and thorax, but these injuries paled in comparison to the fate of the female passenger. During the crash, she had sustained a significant blow to her head, which left her with fatal brain damage. She was found not breathing after being pulled from the wreckage, and shortly after being rushed to hospital, she was pronounced dead. The Bolton defender was supposed to conduct a follow-up breathalyzer, however this test was not completed, with the footballer allegedly sustaining an anxiety attack which left him too shaken up. After an initial court appearance, Marcos Alonso was released on bail, pending the setting of his official hearing. Alonso would return to England and continue playing football before moving to Fiorentina and eventually Chelsea. Eventually, his day in court arrived, 5 years after the crash and death of the unnamed 22-year-old female passenger. The Spanish defender faced a total of 21 months in prison. However, like the majority of footballers and people in power, his sentence was far less serious. A €61,000 fine and a driving ban which didn't even matter because he'd already spent it. For reference, at the time, Marcos Alonso was getting paid around €16,000 a week at Fiorentina. His fine came to less than a month's wages, whilst being one of the lowest paid players at the Italian club. Just over 3 weeks' wages for the life of another person is disgusting, and a reflection of the cruel nature of the injustice of the judicial system. No matter what country you're in, if you have money and power, you are above the law, and other people's lives are a matter of pocket change and no real punishment. After the sentencing, Marcos Alonso signed for Chelsea FC on the 30th of August, and the rest, as they say, is history. Life as a footballer is like no other. You train amongst some of the most profound athletes the world has ever known. Once a week, you play football across the country in front of thousands of adoring and passionate fans. In some people's eyes, you are godlike. You have the power to bring them great joy, burning anger, and longing pain. Some footballers revel in the limelight, others are more humble and want to focus entirely on football while cementing their legacy in the beautiful game. But a few take advantage of this power and take advantage of the exact same people who worship the ground they walk on. Adam Johnson was one of those people. Born on the 14th of July 1987 in Sunderland, England, Adam Johnson always had a love for football. When he was just 8 years old, he joined the Newcastle United Centre of Excellence, a proud moment for himself and his parents. Tens of thousands of children, just like Adam, dream of becoming a professional footballer, playing for their beloved teams. Adam Johnson was one of the lucky few who made their dreams a reality. At the age of 10, Newcastle decided against keeping Adam Johnson within its developmental academy, and so he was released. 2 years would pass before Adam rejoined the developmental cycle, with Middlesbrough signing him in 1999, a club which would be his home for the next 11 years, with a few loans to Leeds and Watford included in the process. On the 7th of March 2005, aged just 17, Johnson made his debut for Middlesbrough against Sporting in the UEFA Cup, a game that ended in defeat. His league debut followed 6 months later, this time with a more positive result, as Middlesbrough took all 3 points in a close clash against London giants Arsenal. For the majority of the first season as a professional footballer, Adam experienced it from the bench, watching his fellow teammates grind out results, with the club's final league position coming in at 14th, above Manchester City, who finished 15th that season. Chelsea also won the league that year. A young Adam Johnson was eager to prove himself, to establish himself as a mainstay in the Middlesbrough team. However, in the October of the 06-07 season, Adam Johnson was loaned to Leeds United for a month. Even following his man of the match debut for the Whites, it wasn't enough to stabilise the struggling Leeds, and he soon returned to Middlesbrough. The following season, Adam Johnson was loaned again, this time to Watford for a 3-month loan. Far more time to prove his worth, and prove his worth he did. In 12 games, Johnson netted 5, a display which saw his parent club recall him earlier than what was agreed, and following his swift departure, Watford regressed back into their old form of inconsistency and subpar performances, winning just 1 in their last 14 games. His good form continued, and for the last 2 years of his time at Middlesbrough, Adam Johnson continued to impress, and by the 09-10 season, he had achieved his goal in making himself an undroppable force. Before long, speculation regarding his future began to arise, and with the player refusing to sign a new contract, with his current deal ending in the summer of 2010, Middlesbrough were forced to listen to offers. With 6 months left on his contract, Middlesbrough had their hands tied when Manchester City arrived with an offer of £7 million for the midfielder. Johnson continued to improve following his move to Manchester City, scoring impressive goals whilst wowing spectators and England coach Fabio Capello with his grace. Johnson would spend only 2 seasons with Manchester City, but in that time, he played a role in winning the club the FA Cup in the 2010-11 season, the Community Shield in 2012, along with the famous league title Manchester City won against all odds, with Aguero's last-minute winner sealing the deal. Following the historic league title win, Sunderland, the city in which Adam Johnson hailed from, placed a bid for the star, and on the 24th of August, Adam Johnson signed for Sunderland on a 4-year deal, with the Black Cats paying £10 million for his services. All seemed well in the camp of Adam Johnson, until the December of 2014, when his true nature began to reveal itself. It was around this time when Johnson began messaging one of his superfans over WhatsApp. I would now like to point out that this person Adam Johnson was messaging, a then 27-year-old man, was 15 years old. And Adam Johnson knew this, as it was one of the first things he asked her when he began grooming her. This girl, blinded by his notoriety and her admiration for the footballer, wasn't able to spot his true intentions. Thankfully, nowadays, I would like to believe there is far more awareness regarding online safety, and that girls are safer online and are educated to help spot red flags before it's too late. She thought the world of him, and he knew that. When he offered her a match-worn shirt, she was, quote, over the moon. She stated she felt overwhelmed by the whole situation, and I'm sure Adam Johnson knew this too. She was unfortunately his prey. Some of the messages shared between the pair were released to the public, and Adam's intentions were clear from the start, asking her what year she was in school, when she would turn 16, and how much older she looked. When being told she was 11 months away from turning 16, the age of consent in the United Kingdom, the 27-year-old Adam Johnson replied, "Ages then, lol." Following their first meeting in the January of 2015, in which the footballer gave the girl his signed shirt, he ominously told her, "I will get this, thank you. It had better be worth it," before going on to suggest the pair share a kiss alongside other physical contact. He ended it by reminding her to continue to delete their conversations, a clear sign he was attempting to hide evidence of their communications, along with the nature of said conversations. He knew what he was doing was wrong, and yet he persisted. 2 weeks later, on the 30th of January, It is alleged this is when Adam Johnson took advantage of the girl and sexually assaulted the 15-year-old fan in his car parked behind a Chinese takeaway. Shortly afterwards, the girl confided with her parents, revealing what had been going on, and the police were notified. Adam Johnson was arrested on the 2nd of March 2015 on suspicion of having sexual activity with a 15-year-old girl and was immediately suspended by Sunderland. However, the suspension was short, and less than 3 weeks later, he was once again playing for Sunderland. Adam Johnson would later be charged with 3 offences, but continued to play. Even after admitting to the club that he had messaged the girl in a sexual manner and had kissed her, he continued to play. In fact, Adam Johnson continued to play for Sunderland until the 6th of February 2016, a whole year after the alleged assault. 5 days later, Adam Johnson pleaded guilty to conducting sexual activity with a child and grooming, and was subsequently released with immediate effect from Sunderland. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, 3 of which he served before being released on parole. During the court proceedings, Adam Johnson was assessed by numerous psychologists, where it was found Adam Johnson hadn't targeted her for her age. Instead, as a result of his general attraction towards her and her easy availability to him during his stardom. Whichever way you look at it, he was sexually attracted to a 15-year-old and assaulted her. It was also found Johnson wasn't a significant risk to children, but that he would be added to the sex offenders registry. Whilst in prison, in a now publicly available video, the disgraced former footballer is seen discussing his crimes with little remorse. Adam Johnson was released from prison on the 22nd of March 2019 after serving 3 of a 6-year sentence, and has since been seen out in public with his girlfriend and newborn son. He has also been seen stumbling out of the clubs after chatting up 18-year-olds, whilst also wearing an inflammatory shirt with the words "Fresh Kid" illustrated on the front. He hasn't played a game of football since his sentencing, and at 36 years old, it looks like, thankfully, he never will. Although completely different cases, I certainly hoped our next subject had shared the same fate. What happens when you give an impressionable teenager millions and millions of pounds who is surrounded by people who treat him as a godlike deity? Well, unfortunately, we know the answer to this question. Mason Greenwood was, at one point, one of the best up-and-coming players the Premier League had ever seen. Born on the 1st of October 2001 in Wibsey near Bradford, Greenwood's future was set as he joined the world to 2 parents, both of which valued the importance of sports and athletics. This early interest led Mason to joining his local team when he was 5 years old. Greenwood was a natural, even at this early age, and before long, his talent was noticed by scouts of one of the biggest clubs in world football, Manchester United. This was a dream come true for Mason Greenwood. He was a boyhood Manchester United fan and idolised Wayne Rooney, a player who started football young and wowed spectators with his raw talent and ball-striking ability. Mason was determined to prove himself, to achieve what he had set out to achieve, and so he applied himself to a greater level compared to his peers at the Halifax Developmental School. He turned up to training early to practice longer, he trained harder than those around him, he made sure both feet were as powerful and useful as the other, eliminating a weakness many professional footballers play with today. His speed was off the charts, and the power in his shots, even at an early age, was mighty impressive. He was a fast learner as well. In fact, Mason Greenwood was so fast that during an under-13s athletics tournament, the future Manchester United star broke the 100-metre record in Great Britain for his age group. He wasn't just fast as a footballer, he was a rapid sprinter. His talent saw him quickly rise through the ranks of the Manchester United Academy, and before long, his hard work was noticed by the senior management, and in July of 2018, when he was 16 years old, Mason Greenwood joined the Manchester United senior squad for the 18-19 pre-season American tour. Although he wouldn't make his official debut until the March of 2019, he did represent the club he had supported since he was a boy on the 20th of July against Club America. Greenwood would break into the Manchester United fold come the 1920 season, scoring important goals in the Europa League against the likes of Astana and Partizan Belgrade, thus making him the youngest Manchester United player in the long history of the club to do so at 17 years and 353 days old, less than 2 weeks from his 18th birthday. Greenwood continued his meteoric rise, scoring for fun before the March of 2020, when it was announced the country would be entering a national lockdown due to the now infamous COVID-19 pandemic. It would be 3 months before football returned and 3 games before Greenwood continued his goal-scoring ways, scoring a brace as Manchester United glided past Bournemouth. His incredible form in the 1920 season saw him rewarded with the famous number 11 shirt going into the 2021 campaign, the shirt that had been worn by Manchester United legend Ryan Giggs. Some may have been intimidated by this great responsibility. However, Mason knew how good he was and thrived under the pressure. However, it was around this time when Mason Greenwood's selfish behaviour began to rear its head in the public eye. During an international match against Iceland, Mason Greenwood and England teammate Phil Foden decided to sneak 2 Icelandic models into the team hotel in order to partake in some late night shenanigans. This, of course, was a breach of the agreed COVID bubble designed to protect the players from the virus along with the general public. The pair had been trusted with the opportunity to represent their country in a foreign land and selfishly betrayed this trust. They were hounded by the media, leaving them deeply ashamed. Both Mason Greenwood and Phil Foden had partners, with the latter having a son born the previous year. Although it was a serious matter at the time, it pales in comparison as to what Mason Greenwood would allegedly do less than 2 years later. On the 30th of January 2022, Mason Greenwood's longtime girlfriend Harriet Robson made a series of disturbing posts onto her Instagram story. These images showed numerous bruises to her legs, a large bruise to what appears to be her side, just underneath her armpit, with a large brown and purple bruise to her arm. Robson also posted a video showing her bleeding profusely from the left side of her mouth with the caption, "To everyone who wants to know what Mason Greenwood actually does to me." Some may try to defend Mason Greenwood. They could attempt to claim Harriet Robson had used makeup and was faking the injuries. However, she didn't just post photos and videos of her injuries, she also made public an audio recording which is just sickening to hear. I am going to play it as I think it helps paint the picture of who Mason Greenwood really is. If you are triggered by themes surrounding abuse and sexual assault in particular, I would suggest skipping past this part of the video. This is your warning.
Use your fucking legs up!
No, I don't want to have sex!
I don't give a fuck what you want, you shit.
Mason!
Shut up! Talking to me. Stop!
Stop putting your dick in
I'm gonna fuck you, you twat!
I don't want to have sex
I don't
with
care,
you.
you want fucking sex with me. Damn me.
Why do I have to do this though?
Because I asked you politely and you wouldn't do it.
Fucked by other people.
I asked you politely and you wouldn't do it, so what else would you want me to do?
Go fuck
I
someone
don't want to experience.
else. You do.
No, I don't. Push me again one more time and watch what happens to you.
No.
Well, you will actually.
What you just heard is allegedly Mason Greenwood attempting to have sex with Harriet, with Miss Robson clearly saying no, to which Mason replied he didn't care what she wanted, whilst mocking her, telling her to shut up. It sounds like Harriet attempts to physically remove Greenwood from her, to which Mason threatens her with perceived violence. He was arrested later that day on suspicion of rape and assault and was subsequently suspended by Manchester United. On the 1st of February, Mason Greenwood was once again arrested, this time on suspicion of sexual assault alongside threats to kill. He was released on bail pending further investigation the following day. 2 months later, his bail was extended to June, and it is alleged it was around this time Harriet Robson asked the police to drop their investigation entirely. On the 15th of October, Mason Greenwood was once again arrested for having contact with Harriet Robson, a breach of his bail conditions. Following this arrest, he was promptly charged with attempted rape for an alleged incident that happened on the 22nd of October the previous year, assaulting Harriet whilst causing actual bodily harm for an alleged altercation in December of 2021, along with engaging in coercive and controlling behaviour spanning all the way back until November of 2018, when Greenwood was 17 years old. He was bailed once again on the 19th of October under the strict conditions that the disgraced footballer have no contact with the witness, and that they must stay in a chosen residence in Barton. On the 2nd of February, Mason Greenwood had all charges against him dropped as Harriet Robson stopped cooperating with the investigation. Without her witness testimony, it would have been nearly impossible to charge Mason Greenwood with attempted and assault. This was met with a mixed reaction from the Manchester United fan base. Some international fans were pleased with the result and took the ruling as proof he had done nothing wrong, whilst others rightly believed it would be a disgrace of the highest order if Manchester United were to welcome Mason Greenwood back into the club. I would like to make it very clear that Mason Greenwood isn't innocent, nor is he guilty. The trial never went to that stage. The evidence against him is publicly available, and that said evidence is enough, in a lot of people's eyes, to convict him. I doubt we'll ever know the full story of what really happened behind closed doors. Following the dropping of charges against him, there was some speculation Greenwood was set to return to Manchester United following a rather vague statement regarding the future of the forward. However, since then, Greenwood has left Old Trafford on loan to join La Liga side Getafe in order to, quote, enable Greenwood to begin to rebuild his career away from Manchester United. And that is where he is today. I think the Mason Greenwood case sheds a light on the potential dangers which come from making a teenager a multimillionaire and global superstar. It's highly unpredictable. Money and power magnifies a person's personality traits. If they're humble and generous before the money and power, they will use their resources to help others. If they are selfish and self-absorbed, they will take advantage of others to gratify their wants and desires. Unfortunately, money and football go hand in hand, and with the rise of grandiose contracts being provided to young talent around the world, I do fear we will see more cases similar to that of Mason Greenwood. No one is ready for that amount of money and responsibility at that age, and so I believe it would be beneficial for teams who provide such contracts to also provide counselling, which is designed to help the footballers acquaint themselves to their newfound fame in a way that grounds them, while still allowing them to reap their rewards without hurting anyone. So far in this video, I have discussed aggressive drunks, selfish drink drivers, paedophiles, and alleged abusers. However, somehow, our final subject is even more shocking than those who have come before him. His name is Bruno Fernandes de Souza, better known as Bruno. Bruno was born in 1984, 2 days before Christmas Day, in southern Brazil. He started his playing career in 2001 for Tom Benz, standing between the sticks, guarding his team's goal in the process. At 6'3", he was perfectly suited for the role of a goalkeeper. Having a lengthier frame is more than useful as a goalkeeper, as it allows for those to take up the role to reach further into the corners and cover more ground, closing the angles in which a player can score from. After a year playing for Tom Benz, Bruno left and joined Atlético Mineiro, a club which would be his home for the next 4 years, 2 of which playing in the youth team before being promoted to the senior side in 2004. It would be in 2006 when Bruno would make his first big move in his career, joining Brazilian giants Corinthians in a deal worth around €2 million. Bruno was excited to play on the big stage, as you can imagine. However, things went in a sour direction rather quickly. The Corinthians manager refused to play the newly acquired shot-stopper ahead of Marcelo, who had come through the academy in 2005. Frustrated with his lack of playing time, Bruno would go out on loan to join the club which he is best known for, that being Flamengo, a well-respected side in Brazilian football who are part of a very exclusive 3-team list who have never been relegated in the history of the Brazilian Serie A. Santos and Sao Paulo make up the other 2. As luck would have it, the first team keeper at the time, Diego, had been sidelined due to an unfortunate injury, which provided the perfect pathway for Bruno to make his name known, although I'm sure he'd rather hope his name be forgotten. He quickly became a fan favourite for his clutch saves, his penalty heroics, and, surprisingly, his ability to score from free kicks. Usually it's a midfielder, a striker, or a winger who relishes the responsibility of taking free kicks, but for Flamengo, Bruno was their man. Fearing a move to Europe with Barcelona interested in the shot-stopper, Flamengo were quick to tie Bruno down to a new contract in 2008, worth somewhere in the region of €3 million. In May of 2009, Bruno became the captain of Flamengo. 1 year later, he was arrested on suspicion of murder. Elijah Samidio was born on the 22nd of February 1985 to parents Louise and Sonia. From a very young age, Elijah had always wanted to become a model, and following her 18th birthday, she moved to Sao Paulo to follow her dreams. It was an entirely new life, and one that took some adjustments. Moving to a big city by yourself can be a very daunting challenge, and shortly afterwards, Elijah was struck with financial difficulties. During this rough patch, Elijah turned to sex work to sustain her financial needs. It is believed the pair met first in 2008, and in 2009, when the pair were at one of Bruno's teammates' barbecues, Elijah and Bruno slept together. During the process, the condom Bruno was using broke, and it is believed it was this incident that led to Elijah becoming pregnant. The two began to see each other much more, even though Bruno had a wife, with the goalkeeper promising to leave his partner to be with Elijah. Bruno asked Elijah to leave her way of work to be with him, and she obliged. However, when Bruno discovered she was pregnant with his child and that she wasn't getting an abortion, he ended the relationship there and then. On the 12th of October 2009, it was alleged that Elijah and Bruno and two of his friends known as Macaroni and Russo practically held her captive, assaulting her, forcing her to take substances known to cause abortions, with Bruno going as far to hold a gun to her head. Following the incident, a restraining order decreeing Bruno stay a minimum of 300 meters away from Elijah was passed, with Bruno alleging Elijah was a known liar, that she was trying to harm him with the story, and that she was simply seeking her 15 minutes of fame. Unfortunately, the judge in charge of providing protection towards victims of domestic abuse denied Elijah the protection she needed, stating she was attempting to abuse the Maria de Peña law, a bill that allows alleged victims of domestic abuse, no matter what sexual orientation nor sex they encompass, to access temporary restraining orders against their alleged abusers. Elijah gave birth to a son on the 10th of February 2010. Following this, she filed to have Bruno take a paternity test, whilst demanding money from the footballer while staying in hotels paid by the goalkeeper. On the 4th of June 2010, Bruno invited Elijah Samidio to stay at his rural farm in Esmeraldas, Minas Gerais. Elijah agreed under the pretense that this would be a good opportunity to iron out certain differences and start planning for the future. She was never seen alive again. Bruno alleged she left the farm under her own steam, whilst abandoning their child with a friend, with the young boy being found in a favela where it's alleged Bruno's wife left him there. What I'm about to tell you is the alleged truth. However, certain details have not been able to be confirmed following the police investigation. Bruno's 17-year-old cousin was discovered in his home. The teenager admitted to hitting Elijah in the head with the butt of his gun, knocking her unconscious. She was then taken to a farm where she would be dismembered by drug dealers and fed to Rottweiler dogs under the orders of Bruno. Her bones were hidden in concrete, making it rather difficult to find her body. A number of arrests were made, the eventual number rising to 7 individuals. Some received a sentence lighter than others. Macaroni was sentenced to 15 years for the murder of Elijah and for concealing her body, whereas Bruno himself was found guilty of the assault, torture, and murder of the mother of his youngest child, and was sentenced to 22 years and 3 months in prison. In February of 2017, Bruno appealed his conviction. However, due to the fact that the appeal process dragged on, his lawyers filed a petition under the rules of habeas corpus, a system that allows those convicted under a law to report unlawful imprisonment, in which it is assessed as to whether or not the conditions of the detention stand by the laws of the country. Shockingly, this appeal was granted, and after 6 years and 7 months of a 22-year sentence, Bruno was released from jail. Surprisingly and depressingly, the goalkeeper was met by a myriad of contract offers from numerous clubs before ending up signing for Boa Esporte Club. Elijah's mother filed a suit in an attempt to return Bruno to jail under the belief the welfare of her grandson was at risk. This suit was denied. Following his release, Bruno made a bizarre public statement in which I will read in full. Before I do so, I would like to remind you that this man tortured and murdered the mother of his son in a brutal manner. What happened happened. I made a mistake, a serious one, but mistakes happen in life. I'm not a bad guy. People tried to bury my dreams because of one mistake, but I asked God for forgiveness. So I'm carrying on with my career, dude. 2 months later, The murderous shot-stopper was re-arrested and returned to prison, as it was found the blame for the delay in the appeal process was partly due to the actions of his legal team. Another 2 years went by, and in July of 2019, Bruno Fernandes de Souza was released again from prison and was ordered to serve the rest of his sentence under house arrest during the night. He made his return to football shortly after, signing for Pocos del Caldas in 2019, Rio Branco in 2020, and Atletico Carioca in 2021, where he still plays football to this day. The world can be a dark and horrible place to live sometimes. A lot of us look up to footballers, we think the world of them, but just like a lot of people, they have a dark side and some are better at concealing it than others. If you enjoyed the video, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. It would truly mean the world to me. Happy Halloween, everybody.